Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm so thrilled you're joining us today.
It's going to be a good one.
It really is, because today we are tackling something that will, frankly, fundamentally shift how you look at learning.
And how you approach your daily work, too.
Yeah, exactly. Really how you process the overwhelming amount of information in the world around you. We have this dense, highly technical, but absolutely brilliant text today.
It's titled The Architecture of the Polymathic Mind.
Right. And our specific mission for this deep dive is, well, it's incredibly ambitious.
Very.
We are going to move far beyond that old, tired cliche of just being a generalist or a Renaissance person.
You know the type we mean. Someone who knows a little bit about a lot of things.
That doesn't really master any of it.
Exactly.
We are tossing that outdated idea entirely out the window today. Instead, our goal is to equip you with rigorous technical frameworks to dismantle your own rigid thinking.
To actually build your own highly optimized personal knowledge ecosystem.
Which is a critical shift in perspective for anyone trying to navigate today's landscape, I mean.
It is. We live in this hyper-specialized world, one that constantly pushes you to pick a single lane, stay in it, and never look over the divider.
Yeah, stay in your lane.
Right.
Yeah.
But the modern learner, if they truly want to thrive and not just survive, has to become what the text calls a cognitive architect.
A cognitive architect. I love that.
It's no longer just about accumulating isolated facts or, memorizing data points. It's about consciously designing the infrastructure of your own mind.
So that you can navigate and, more importantly, synthesize an incredibly fragmented landscape.
Precisely.
I just love that framing. It's about active strategy rather than passive absorption. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the very foundation of this cognitive architecture.
The lattice?
Yes, the text introduces this structural concept called the epistemological lattice.
Which sounds like a terrifying term from a graduate-level philosophy seminar.
It really does. But as I understand it, it's basically the foundational map of this new mental multiverse. What exactly are we looking at when we talk about this lattice?
So think of the epistemological lattice as a nonlinear architecture for your knowledge.
Okay.
Traditionally, we visualize learning as a series of straight, isolated ladders.
Like climbing the ranks.
Right. You have one ladder for biology, a completely separate ladder for business, and maybe another one in the corner for art.
And they never touch.
Exactly. The lattice demands you abandon the ladders. You need to imagine a sprawling, multidimensional, interconnected web.
A web built entirely out of nodes and edges, according to the text.
Yes. The nodes are what it calls core ontological stabilizers.
Okay, stop right there, because core ontological stabilizers is a massive mouthful.
It is a bit dense, yeah.
If we translate that for someone, driving to work right now, are we just talking about the fundamental, unshakable rules of a specific subject?
Essentially, yes. They are the deep truths of a discipline that resist being watered down.
Like thermodynamics and physics.
Perfect example. You can't just ignore the laws of thermodynamics because they're inconvenient for your theory.
Right.
Or narrative structure in literature, the hero's journey. These are solid, unshakable anchors in your web.
They give your knowledge structure.
So it doesn't just collapse into a messy puddle of vague ideas.
But a bunch of heavy anchors sitting on the ocean floor doesn't make a ship.
No, it doesn't.
You need the connecting pieces. And this is where the text introduces interfacial linkages.
Yes, the linkages.
This was the concept that really made me sit up and take notes. These linkages are essentially translational bridges.
They allow a rigorous concept to migrate from one completely isolated domain into another.
Without losing its structural integrity.
Exactly.
The text gives this fantastic example, taking the biological concept of adaptive fitness.
How an organism survives by mutating in a harsh environment.
Right, and applying that exact rigorous scientific framework to corporate marketing strategies.
And that translation isn't just a fun intellectual party trick.
It feels like one sometimes.
It does, but it is a structural necessity for the polymathic mind. When you build these interfacial linkages, you eventually reach a reflective layer.
Where you stop seeing the world in binary terms.
Right. You stop saying art versus algorithm or science versus humanities. Instead, you start experiencing what the text defines as asymptotic fluency.
Okay, asymptotic fluency. So, basically, accepting that you are never going to reach 100% perfect, exhaustive mastery of every single topic.
But getting close enough to be dangerous.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
True polymathy isn't about knowing everything. It's about a continuous path of approximation toward integrative mastery.
You are always approaching the curve, even if you never touch it.
Yes. And the engine that actually drives you along that path is called the Möbius learning loop.
The Möbius learning loop, it's such a great visual, a continuous twisting surface where the inside becomes the outside.
It really is.
But how does that actually function in practice? Let's say I hit a massive roadblock while trying to learn something complex. How does the loop help me?
Well, it functions as a recursive scaffold.
Okay.
It takes an isolated fact or even a moment of profound frustration and transforms it into a gateway for a parallel domain.
The text cites a really beautiful example for this.
It does. Imagine you are wrestling with a highly complex quantum mechanics problem.
And you hit a wall.
You hit a wall. Your brain is exhausted.
We've all been there.
Right. Instead of just stopping and admitting defeat, the Möbius loop trains you to spiral that exact problem out into a completely different field.
Like musical resonance theory.
Yes. You take the mathematical frequencies of those quantum states and apply them to the harmony of musical chords.
By shifting the context but keeping the core problem.
You maintain cognitive propulsion, you don't stall out. You use the momentum of one field to violently crack open another.
Wait, there is a massive trap hiding in there, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you just start smashing random unrelated ideas together to see what sounds cool, you end up with what the text brilliantly calls regurgitative syncretism.
Regurgitative syncretism.
Which basically means a superficial, messy blending of ideas that lacks any real intellectual rigor.
It's like putting ketchup on a bowl of vanilla ice cream.
And calling it avant-garde culinary fusion.
Right. It isn't fusion, it's just gross.
And entirely unhelpful.
Very unhelpful. To prevent that ketchup on ice cream scenario, you have to practice controlled ambiguity.
Controlled ambiguity.
This is the discipline of intentionally tolerating contradictions in your mind without immediately trying to resolve them or force them to fit together neatly.
Letting those contradictory ideas sit in your head, letting them clash and fight.
That discomfort is the actual catalyst for real, profound synthesis.
The lattice has to be a living, breathing cartography. It adapts, it merges, but it must strictly preserve the methodological integrity of the original disciplines.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because maintaining that living cartography requires something the text calls cognitive flexibility. And I want to make this crystal clear for you listening. The text goes out of its way to clarify that cognitive flexibility is not some soft, meaningless corporate buzzword you put on a resume.
Not at all.
It is entirely about cognitive friction. It is the deliberate and honestly sometimes painful induction of mental dissonance.
Designed to literally break apart your rigid, established neural pathways.
It's intense.
It is the alchemy of discomfort. If you aren't slightly uncomfortable, you aren't being cognitively flexible.
You are just resting on your laurels.
Exactly. The text actually breaks down 3 highly practical, highly rigorous techniques for inducing this friction in your daily life.
The first one is called associative drift, right?
Yes. Associative drift. This is where you force novel connections between completely incongruous, unrelated stimuli.
The text gives the example of linking a dry, incredibly dense legal precedent to the scent of cinnamon.
Or to a specific, striking musical chord.
Wait, smelling cinnamon while reading a lawsuit?
No.
That sounds ridiculous. Am I supposed to light a cinnamon candle every time I review a contract? How does that actually help with cognitive friction?
It sounds absurd until you look at the neurology behind it. The point isn't that the smell of cinnamon somehow explains the nuances of corporate law.
Right.
The point is connection as creation. By linking a highly analytical task to a purely sensory input, you are
You're forcing a brand new, highly unusual neural pathway to fire.
Exactly. This process actively weakens your old, rigid habits of thought and allows a new, adaptable framework to emerge.
You are basically keeping your brain off balance so it can't fall back into lazy routines.
Precisely.
That makes a lot of sense. You're hacking your own neural pathways.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the second technique, framing perturbation.
Framing perturbation.
Which, to me, is about deliberately challenging your own ingrained philosophical assumptions. It accelerates flexibility by forcing you to look through a totally foreign lens.
Like trying to use Buddhist moral philosophy to explain to your boss why you missed a major quarterly deadline.
Good luck with that.
Right. Or, as the text suggests, looking at a highly complex economic issue strictly through that Buddhist lens.
We're trying to solve a brutal supply chain logistics problem using existentialist principles.
Exactly. When you do that, you are forcefully confronting your own intellectual blind spots.
You might realize your supply chain problem isn't just a math issue, it's an issue of human motivation.
And that resulting discomfort.
That feeling of, this doesn't make any sense.
Yes, that is a clear signal that you are standing in fertile ground for real growth.
Which perfectly sets up the third technique. And honestly, I think this is the most powerful tool for you listening today. Conceptual boundary violation.
It's a heavy hitter.
This is way beyond casual interdisciplinary study. This is the intentional sabotage of a discipline's rules.
You take the core principles of one field, you dismantle them, and you aggressively apply them to a completely unrelated domain.
The text's specific example is mind-blowing to me.
The musical counterpoint one.
Yes. It suggests applying the strict mathematical rules of musical counterpoint.
How different melodies interweave and resolve against each other.
Right. Using that to structure a legal argumentation in a courtroom.
It feels entirely wrong to the rigid, specialized mind.
Because it forces the brain to question its own coherence.
Exactly. A lawyer isn't trained to think about harmonies and dissonance. They're trained in logic and precedent.
But that exact dissonance is where transcendent synthesis happens.
To make conceptual boundary violation work, however, requires a habit of deliberate marginalization.
Deliberate marginalization.
We have to actively seek out perspectives, books, and environments that provoke irritation in you, rather than consensus.
If you are constantly comfortable with the media you consume and the things you are learning,
You are not inducing cognitive friction. You are just reinforcing your existing biases.
so we all have to practice daily unlearning.
Daily unlearning.
You have to wake up and rigorously interrogate your own core assumptions. You have to actively fight your own brain every single day.
Or the friction stops.
And that beautiful epistemological lattice we talked about just solidifies into a cage.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, how do we actually learn, process, and retain all of this chaotic new information?
Yeah, how do we keep it all straight?
The text is absolutely adamant that traditional spaced repetition completely fails the nonlinear mind.
The kind we all used with flashcards in high school.
Exactly. Instead, it introduces a concept called interleaved spaced repetition.
I'm so glad the text brings this up, because I have always hated flashcards.
See?
Traditional spaced repetition assumes you just need to drill the same isolated fact over and over until it finally sticks in your short-term memory.
Right.
Why does that fail us in the real world?
It fails because the real world isn't neatly categorized into flashcards. Real-world problems are messy and overlapping.
Interleaved spaced repetition fixes this by toggling aggressively between completely different disciplines.
To strengthen your brain's contextual switching muscles.
The text mentions reviewing quantum mechanics principles directly alongside Renaissance art concepts in the exact same study session.
You aren't just memorizing facts. You are training your brain to encode knowledge flexibly.
You are preparing it for that conceptual boundary violation we just talked about.
So your brain doesn't panic when it has to switch gears.
And that requires a structured approach to exploring new domains, which brings us to the ultimate toolkit for the polymathic learner.
The SPICE framework.
Now, as a strategist, I immediately latched onto this, but I have a bone to pick with the author here.
Oh?
The text calls it the SPICE framework,
Hmm.
and then explicitly lists the phases as hovering, deep diving, deciding, and declining.
Yes.
Now, I might not be a math genius, but HDDD definitely does not spell spicy.
It's a fair critique. The author's brilliance clearly doesn't extend to naming acronyms.
Clearly not.
To clarify for our listener, the true acronym for SPICE stands for survey, probe, interrogate, call, and extract.
Okay, that makes way more sense.
But functionally, the text describes the actions you take during those steps as hovering, diving, deciding, and declining.
It is meant to provide what the text calls structured randomness when you approach a totally unfamiliar topic.
Yes.
Let's walk through those functional phases then. First, you hover over a domain to get the macro view.
You survey the landscape.
Then you deep dive into the technical specifics.
You probe and interrogate.
Then you hit the critical phase, deciding.
You decide which core ontological stabilizers.
Those heavy anchors.
Exactly. Which ones you actually want to extract.
And finally, declining, which means you intentionally decline to learn the rest.
You cull the noise.
You don't need to get a PhD in the subject. You extract the node, you build the edge to your lattice, and you get out.
That intentional declining is absolutely vital. We live in an age of information gluttony. Declining is a superpower.
It really is.
And it's what makes polymathic project-based learning, or PBL, possible.
Polymathic PDL.
It demands epistemological pluralism. It means you aren't just solving a unidimensional project.
The text gives the example of designing a sustainable urban system.
To do this successfully, the learner is forced to simultaneously apply the rigorous mathematical lenses of engineering,
The behavioral insights of the social sciences,
the predictive models of data analytics.
and the heavy moral weight of ethical theory.
Every single one of those lenses completely transforms the problem-solving strategy.
It demands iterative hypothesis testing across multiple domains at once.
Yes.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener, waking up on a Tuesday morning?
Right, the practical application.
Because building lattices, inducing cognitive friction, and doing polymathic project-based learning sounds incredible in theory.
Oh.
But I'm looking at my calendar right now, and I barely have time to eat lunch. How on earth does a normal person schedule this?
It sounds like a full-time job just to manage the lattice.
It does.
This brings us to what the text calls time architecture.
Time architecture.
The polymath treats time very differently than the rest of us. Time is not just a commodity to be sliced up into identical, interchangeable, one-hour meeting blocks.
It is a state-dependent medium.
Exactly. The text lays out a very specific, tiered temporal framework based on ultradiurnal rhythms.
The natural peaks and valleys of our brain's energy.
Yes. The core of this architecture is the 90 to 180-minute deep work epoch.
Okay.
This is a massive, uninterrupted block of time dedicated entirely to your dominant discipline, say physics or whatever your primary career field happens to be.
Okay, so that's the main course.
Right.
And then you surround that massive epoch with what the text calls satellite microblocks.
Yes, the microblogs.
These are rapid 15 to 30-minute bursts of highly focused study every 3 to 5 days, dedicated purely to allied domains.
So you do your 3 hours of heavy physics work, and then maybe on Thursday afternoon, you do a 20-minute microblock on bioethics.
More Renaissance art.
Exactly. It gives you a shallow competency in those other fields, but more importantly, it triggers cross-pollination.
It's literally feeding the Möbius loop we talked about earlier.
It is. But there is a crucial warning the text issues here.
What's that?
You cannot just seamlessly jump straight from a grueling physics epoch right into a bioethics microblock. You absolutely must implement contextual scaffolding.
Contextual scaffolding, what does that actually look like in practice?
These are ritualized physical shifts. It could be changing your physical posture, moving from a sitting desk to a standing desk.
Okay.
It could mean physically walking into a different room, altering the ambient lighting, or switching your auditory cues.
Like putting on a specific type of background noise only when you do microblocks.
Exactly. You have to neurologically separate the tasks. Your brain needs a physical signal that the rules of engagement have changed.
Because if you don't use that scaffolding, the text warns you'll fall into decision entropy.
Decision entropy.
Your fragmented attention will just bleed from one task to the next, eroding any real progress.
You'll sit down to study bioethics, but your brain will still be grinding gears on physics.
The time architecture is meant to act as a neurochemical reaction chamber.
I love that phrase.
It weaponizes the rhythm of extreme focus and intentional rest to transform your broad general interests into deep synthesized mastery.
To manage that complex reaction chamber, you need the right ecosystem of tools. You can't just keep this all in a spiral notebook.
No, building a personal knowledge ecosystem is non-negotiable here.
Definitely.
The text outlines 3 specific categories of tools you need. First, aggregation.
Yeah.
You need tools that allow for non-linear Zettelkasten-style note-taking.
The text mentions tools like Rome Research, Obsidian, or Neo4j for mapping semantic knowledge graphs.
But let's pause. We just threw a lot of heavy tech jargon at the listener.
Oh, we did.
Can you give us an ELI 5 explain? Like, I'm 5 on what a Zettelkasten and a semantic knowledge graph actually are.
Absolutely. Zettelkasten is just a German word for a slipbox.
Okay.
It's a method where instead of writing notes in a linear document top to bottom, you write individual ideas on separate slips or digital cards.
And then you explicitly link them together.
Yes. It mimics how your brain actually works.
And a semantic knowledge graph, like Neo4j.
It's just a database that stores those links. It visually maps out how your note on quantum physics connects to your note on Beethoven.
It lets you see the lattice.
Exactly.
Perfect. So that's aggregation. The second category is distillation.
This is where you leverage carefully interrogated AI to summarize raw data.
turning an avalanche of noise into actionable insights.
But the text is very clear with its warning here.
Yes, you must critically interrogate the AI outputs, or you'll just trap yourself in algorithmic echo chambers.
Or the AI only feeds you what it thinks you want to hear.
Right. And third is application. You need collaborative platforms like Coda to deploy this knowledge in real time, blending documents and databases seamlessly.
What's fascinating here is the philosophy behind the tools. The text explicitly warns against the trap of seeking a single, perfect super tool that does everything.
Your ecosystem must be decentralized.
And most importantly, you must prioritize data ownership,
Storing your mind's architecture in plain text or markdown.
which is just a very simple, universal text format.
Ensuring that your epistemological lattice isn't locked behind a proprietary corporate server that might go bankrupt next year.
The architecture belongs to you.
And as much as we love optimizing our tools, you can't build this lattice entirely alone.
No, you can't.
The text places a massive emphasis on finding the right mentors, but it specifically notes you don't want the traditional one-way street where a wise guru lectures a quiet student.
You need mentorship defined by exponential reciprocity.
Exponential reciprocity.
Yes, viewing mentorship as a living, breathing system. A polymathic mentor needs relational versatility.
They must be able to guide you across diverse disciplines without imposing a rigid traditional hierarchy.
They provide scaffolding proficiency, which means they gradually increase the complexity of the problems they throw at you to perfectly match your growth.
But the reciprocal insightfulness is the real key.
The mentor must be actively reshaped by the mentee's raw curiosity and fresh challenges.
It is a dynamic, bidirectional loop that accelerates cognitive expansion for both people involved.
It is an exchange, not a lecture.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
From building epistemological lattices and triggering the Möbius learning loop to bypass mental roadblocks.
To intentionally causing cognitive friction with associative drift and conceptual boundary violations.
We've looked at the SPICE-E framework for exploring new domains, the 90 to 180-minute deep work epochs for time architecture,
And the specific tools you need to aggregate all of this data without losing your mind.
If there's one core takeaway to distill from this incredible text, it's this. By adopting these rigorous frameworks, you evolve from being a simple, scattered generalist into what the text beautifully calls a quantum weaver.
A quantum weaver.
You are literally threading the tapestry of human knowledge with both the exacting mathematical precision of a physicist and the wild, intuitive leap of an artist.
This raises an important question.
What's that?
Why commit to this exhausting level of rigor? Why not just be a specialist? Because this is not a quick sprint.
Yeah.
It's the autodidact's marathon. We live in a world that is desperate for synthesis and big-picture solutions.
But is fundamentally wired to reward fragmentation and silos.
Exactly. Applying these lattices, relentlessly managing your time architecture, relying on interleaved, spaced repetition.
This is how you not only navigate a hyper-specialized world, but how you fundamentally thrive in it.
Your lattice eventually stops being just a scaffold. It becomes a living consciousness that processes the world for you.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought to leave you with today.
Okay.
We've spent this entire deep dive looking at how cognitive friction and conceptual boundary violations are the ultimate keys to transcendent synthesis in your work, your study, and your career.
Right.
But what happens when you apply this beyond academia or your professional life?
Interesting.
What if you actively applied the strict, rule-bound logic of your day job to the chaotic, messy, emotional landscape of your personal relationships? Or vice versa? What if you brought the messy, emotional intuition of your private life into the cold, calculated logistics of your profession?
That is a fascinating boundary violation.
Could the very discomfort of crossing that deeply personal boundary be the exact catalyst needed to evolve your own living consciousness?
It's a profound friction to consider.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep building your lattice, keep seeking out that friction, and we'll see you next time.